Boom. Let's go.
Hello, how are you?
Exhausted and very hungry.
Okay.
But counting down to my annual end of year holiday leave, which I'm looking forward to.
That'll be nice. I don't have that, but that would be nice.
I mean, it's just the time that I decide to take leave. I always take off the last 2 weeks of the year.
I know. I don't though. So.
I know.
Also, I don't think I could if I wanted to. I don't think I'm allowed to, or I don't think I even have enough seniority to even get one of those weeks.
Oh my. Okay. All right. Everything good on your end?
In what way?
Always life,
Oh,
work.
I guess it was okay. It's hectic, but I guess I'm all right. I'm
Yeah.
alive. Hello. It's very cold.
It's
I'm
so
also
cold.
I'm also kind of sweating because Jesus lit a fire, so I'm
Oh,
confused.
nice.
It would be nicer if I wasn't sweating.
So funny.
But yeah, I guess I'm all right.
All
It's
right. All
weird
right.
recording at this hour. It's a strange time for us to record. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I
anyway.
would love to do this all the time right after work, but we do what we got to do when we're in the crunch time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So anyway, what are you reading or what did you recently finish?
So I started this book called The List. I think this came out last year.
Mm-hmm.
William Morrow sent this to me. They sent me two actually, but I gave one to Kyra. The List by Yomi Agoki. That's probably wrong. I'm sorry. Anyway, I do remember seeing this author. Maybe it was Good Morning America. I don't know. It was like the middle of the night, and it was just on the TV, and they were talking about her book. And I like made a sleepy mental note, like, "Oh, I'm gonna read that one day." And then it was sent to me, so that was great. Okay, so here's what's going on. There's this couple, and they are like a few weeks away from getting married. Okay, everybody's all excited, and then something happens online. This thing called The List comes out. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, the future bride and the future groom are being inundated by their friends asking them, "Have you seen the list?" Asking her, "Are you okay? Have you seen the list?" Neither one of them knew what was going on, but when they figured out what was going on, this is where things start to get crazy. So, someone put together a list of men in like high positions or like positions of like power in the industry, music industry, whatever, were accused of like, you know, um harassing or raping women, and the groom is on the list.
Mm.
Now, here's where it gets extra sticky. Not only is her future groom on the list, but also the future bride is a writer. And what she is known for and what she writes about are these type of Me Too situations.
Hmm.
So there's a conundrum, right? So I'm only about, I don't know, probably 80 pages in, but so now she's the one in a position where, yes, I want to believe the other women, but also, well, he's not that way with me. And then on his side, I don't know what to think, because of course he's given us the "I would never do that, I couldn't do that." But then he's like, "But if she ever found out." So already he's given us two or three sides of a coin, and it's getting very messy. It's getting messier and messier by the page. So I'm enjoying it. I'm having a good time,
Interesting.
and it's extremely entertaining. And that is The List.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I do not have as much to say about what I am reading because I just started and it's huge and it's weird and I'm probably like about 100 pages in.
Okay.
And that is Terra Nostra by Carlos Fuentes.
I've heard about
Um,
that book.
this I don't know what to tell you is happening because I don't quite know what
Oh,
is
okay.
but this is
Okay.
translated from Spanish. We start in sort of like um a contemporary to sometime, not now obviously.
Yeah.
Um France somewhere, and we're following this guy. He's got one arm, he's wearing a placard, he works for like a baker or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
average walks around with like a plaque, like advertising, those guys with the signboards.
Yeah.
And he's walking through his day, and like time just does weird things. All these women keep just randomly giving birth, and then they're pointing to him as the father of them.
Okay.
Uh Everything just goes all wonky, and he gets like
Hmm.
some letter from the past, and things are very strange. And then we slip into like the early history of Spain, I think. And you're following this guy. His name is um well, he's the king, he's El Senor. His name is Felipe. Um and it's just trippy. I think this is really like it's going to bring you through sort of this adjacent to actual history of Spain,
Mm.
and everything Spain has like kind of inflicted on the world.
Yeah.
Um, i- it's just very bizarre. It's a really weird book. There's a lot of religion right now, obviously, because there's all these different religious factions that are kind of all
Yeah.
warring, different kinds of Christianity, Judaism, Muslim, Islam, all this stuff, right? So it's just a very trippy book.
Hmm.
It's not that I mean, I am enjoying it. The writing is very good. The translation is very good. I just do it's so much, like there's so much, right? I don't know what's happening yet. I don't have my feet on the ground
Right.
yet.
You don't have a grasp on it right at the moment. Yeah.
Also, like I would wonder what Jesus would think of this because he probably has like a better understanding just generally of Spanish history going into
Oh,
it. So
yeah.
he might like pick up on things I'm not picking up on, right? Um
Right.
my goal is to just kind of let it wash over me and see where I go. So like that is my like December challenge is Terra Nostra, Carlos
Wow.
Fuentes.
Okay.
Um yeah, and it came with this like newspaper article about him, but I'm not going to touch it too much because sometimes it gives me hives.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm allergic
Hmm.
to air. I mean, like I'm
I
allergic to everything.
know.
So yeah. Before we launch into what we were going to talk about, I just wanted to say like a little shout out. We got a comment on the Celebrity Book Clubs episode we did, season 3, episode 129.
Hmm.
And it's from a Rachel, and she says, I just found your channel. I love your vibes and book taste. It's so refreshing to see two female friends that don't just read YA and romance. I feel seen. I thought
Oh,
that was lovely.
that is
So thank you,
lovely.
Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah.
That's so nice. I
Anyway,
love that.
leave a nice comment. We might read it. Anyway.
Yeah.
So what are we here to talk about?
We're going to talk about The Secret History by Donna Tartt.
All right. So
Yeah.
I want you to sort of lead this discussion because you just finished it. I've read it twice.
Hmm.
I feel like you had a trippy, like not trippy experience. I'm sorry, I'm stuck in Terra Nostra. I feel like you had an experience. So
I mean, I don't know if I had an experience. I don't know what I had.
what do
I
you
know
mean?
I know that this is a lot of people's favorite book.
Mm-hmm.
I like The Secret History,
Mm-hmm.
but The Goldfinch is still my favorite right now. I'm getting ready to start The Little Friend over the
Mm-hmm.
weekend, so we'll see where I land on all of her books, but I like The Secret History fine enough. It was a good read. It was a good read, but like I'm still I'm still strong for The Goldfinch. Yeah.
Uh I mean I still have to do my reread of the Goldfinch. But I think that The Little Friend is better than Secret History.
Mm. Mhm.
in a different,
Which was her
in a
first? Was this her
this one.
first? Okay.
Yeah. But in like a different, but it's for like, okay, so I think that The Secret History is probably the most of the two. Well, let's not talk about the Goldfinch. Of the two, the more like readable, the more commercial, the more accessible, the more like conventional. I know it's not
Hmm.
a conventional story, but it is more conventional in terms of having like a heavy plot and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, The Little Friend is, I think, just a much more mature novel. When you start to really like dig in and see what she's doing and what she's saying about like the South and poverty and all these things about society, and you can kind of see her love of Dickens in it. It's just like a richer story.
Yeah.
But I also understand why it's not as beloved big picture by like
Hmm.
everybody as this, because this being The Secret History is just, it's much more like commercial. It's much more straightforward of a plot in terms of something you're familiar with, I think,
Hmm.
as a reader, right? So you
Yeah.
have the dark academia nature of it all. You know that there's a murder. You know that there's something you're building up to, and you're piecing in the puzzle like a Columbo episode almost. And then she really does take you for quite a trip at the end,
Hmm.
and hits you with things that you weren't quite expecting to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's just more palatable maybe to the average reader.
Oh,
And I
maybe
think
so.
that
Yeah.
might
You make some good
be
points.
why this might be her most like beloved. That's
Yeah.
my theory on The Secret History.
But you know what else I've realized too? And of course, I don't know like all, but a number of people who love The Secret History, like, oh, this is one of my favorite books. They've never read anything else by her.
Yeah,
It's like they stop here.
I don't know how one does that. I would, well, I think a lot of people like in real time and then after. So like if you read this when it came out and then there was a lot of excitement for The Little Friend and it's such a divergence from this,
Hmm.
and it was sold, we talked about this once before, it feels like it's sold in the blurbs and in all of that as like it's going to be this young girl solving the crime, like the murder of her brother, right, one day on
Right.
Mother's Day, and that's really not what it is. And so I feel like there was almost this letdown if
Oh,
you went like,
okay.
in real time.
Yes. Yeah.
There were a lot of people that were kind of, I don't know, they were thrown off by The Little Friend, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if there are people that weren't as excited to maybe read The Goldfinch, and obviously, like there are many people who have read all three. Um, but there was kind of that mixed thing in the middle. It's not like she has this
Right.
amazingly
I
huge
it's
catalog,
back
just
exactly.
3 books. So,
Right.
um, but I don't know. I feel like people, I don't know. I just feel like readers, this is sound mean. I just feel like there's a lot of readers that aren't, I don't know, they're not like in it like you and I, you know? They're not
Ye-
trying to go deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Perhaps. Because I thought it was strange. Like this, like if I read this first, this would make me say, "Oh, well, I've got to read her other stuff." You know what
Yes,
I mean? It would
but
definitely make me say, "I've got to read her other stuff."
I don't know if everybody thinks like that. I don't
Huh.
think that it's like an uncommon thing, but I think there are a lot of people that are just like, I've heard this book is popular. I'm going to read this book. And it is like living in its own silo outside of
Mm,
wanting to like read more from the author.
right.
Especially because there's only 2 books and they seem to be kind of different from this. It's not like
Right.
she's writing. How many people like to read the same kind of book over and over and over again?
Well, apparently a lot.
So I don't know. This is all just this is all coming
We're
out of
just
my
spitballing here,
hiney.
spitballing.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's definitely like a really interesting read. I mean, there's a lot of it that feels sort of almost nostalgic um to someone of like our age reading it, right? Like
Mm.
obviously Donna Tartt is much older than I am, but like there, like, I remember living sort of in these times. Um, it's also a story that could only really exist in a pre, like, internet cell age.
Yeah. Yeah, because
That
those
that
shenanigans, it's like somebody would have.
yeah, that would have ruined it. Like,
Yeah, for sure. Let me also say there were things in my mind that I thought were going to be happening and going on that just did not happen. I was like, huh. I had a lot of assumptions about this story, and I was wrong. I
like
was wrong.
what? Anything you feel like you can share?
Yeah. Yes, yes, because I can be slightly vague. I thought there was going to be much more sinister things happening between the professor and the students.
Oh,
And I and I
yeah.
I thought that he was going to be like a serious major player in the story all throughout, wrapped in with these students. So I was wrong on that. Um and I thought this, not that they didn't do something terrible, because they did, but I thought it was going to be like murder gang. I thought very terrible things about these
You thought
people.
it was gonna be more intentionally malicious?
Yes, yes, yes.
Like, methodically planned out kind of
At,
malicious.
right, and not just a one time thing either. Like we get off on
Yeah.
this. We're doing it a few times. You know.
Yeah.
The other thing, um, I I while I thought these characters were sort of terrible, I did not hate them. I was not put off by them. Buddy really, really annoyed me. But like just in general, I I was like, oh God, I can't. I wasn't like, oh, I can't stand these characters. I didn't really have that. I was like, they're pretty awful, but all right, I'm along for the ride. They weren't that unlikable for me.
My first read, I really hated them, and I just really didn't care. Like, I didn't care that about any of it. I was like, I don't care that you got yourself into this scrape. I don't care that, like, you have to figure out what to do now. I don't care that,
Right.
like, I really don't. It's like, oh, this book. But I read it a lot more closely the second time,
Mm-hmm.
and, like, tried to put all of that to the side and really give it a chance, and not kind of write everybody off once I started to hate them.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a different experience. Um, I don't think I liked anybody, but I had a lot more empathy for people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even Bunny at times I had empathy for.
Yeah.
Like, especially when you meet his family and you see, like, how well loved he was and how
Mm-hmm.
close knit they are, and
Yeah.
you know remembering that everybody has people, that
Yeah.
love them, and there's more than just. I mean, Bunny was not great by any means, but neither really was anybody else in the story. And so, did Bunny deserve
Right.
everything Bunny got? I don't think so. Um,
Right. Exactly. What's
I do
the?
think.
Oh, go ahead. I'm listening.
Oh, I was going to say, I do think the teacher is a really interesting person to talk about, because I feel like Julian is a very interesting character that is not present on the page as much as he is present, sort of looming over everything, but has, like, an idea. Not a he's not anything of substance. He's so superficial. Um,
Right.
he has it, so he's this very interesting character for these kids to build their, like, obsession around, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much awe and just sort of admiration for this man, and he tells all these little stories about, like, the famous people he meets and all this other stuff, and he
Which,
just.
by the way, I never know when to believe him. I'm like, is he just a bold-faced liar? I never knew if I could believe anything he was saying.
But these young kids just find him so charming, right? And so they're
Yeah.
so, like, in love with him that it leads them down this false path to
Yeah.
that ends in sort of ruin. And I found his character very, very interesting, especially for somebody who's not really a part of the story.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Without him, this none of this would have taken place.
Right. Yeah. Because when I first started reading it, what's his name? Julian Morrow. And the way that he chooses to run his program or whatever, I was like, that is awfully strange. The university is allowing him to do that. That was weird, and that is kind of what also led me to start thinking like, oh, it's gonna really get sinister now, because he's kind of like closed them off from everyone else, where he has like all autonomy, and like it's really only him that has these students like all the time, so he can get away with more. I'm telling you, I got like a whole other story in my head.
Well, that's not the story that happened.
It was really
Uh,
funny.
it was funny.
Who's the main kid?
Who's the main, which main kid? So there's like 5 kids.
Not Bunny, not the brother and sister, not the rich guy, the other one, the
Henry?
humble guy. Is that his name?
Henry?
Is that his
The one
name?
with, I don't know who you mean, the narrator?
Yes. Is his name Henry?
No.
Oh, what's his name? Does it begin with a C? I can't find it now.
I mean, you mean the poor kid who comes over from California and is
Yes,
their narrator
him.
of their story?
Yeah.
Richard?
So here's what's funny, because his parents are so terrible. It would seem more fitting if Bunny was their kid.
Or do you mean Francis, the one whose parents are the oh I know, I guess Richard's terrible too. Because Francis is the twins, right? Or not the twins, but
No, I thought
whatever.
that was Charles. And by the way, I mixed these names up the whole time reading this
Oh
story.
yeah, Charles and Camilla
are the twins.
Well, I don't really. Are they really twins? I can't.
Or
Remember.
siblings.
Whatever.
They're just siblings.
Whatever. Siblings.
Yeah.
And then Frances is the one with like the mom who's an actress or whatever, or was an actress or some sort of celebrity. And then Henry is the one who is the rich guy, that's going to take them to Argentina.
Right.
And then Richard is our narrator.
Yes.
Right. And
Richard,
Bunny is our
Richard Papin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
We got them all.
Parents were awful. Yeah. I'll confuse them again in about 15 minutes. Don't worry.
That's all right. It takes a while to get them all right.
It's fine. It's fine.
I
Maybe
do like
Richard was the one I liked the most.
Really? I feel like Richard needed more of a spine.
I thought Henry was going to be like, oh, I dig you, but he got weird too. He got weird, flaky, and all the other stuff.
Well, I don't think anybody's really supposed to be likable.
Yeah.
I do think, excuse me. I do think that Tartt is saying a lot about academia and the reverence for academia, and like basically there's more than all of this.
Mm-hmm.
If you place all of your eggs in that basket, it's not necessarily going to bring you anywhere good. It's not like the moral high ground or anything like that. And you see it because kind of like, Julian is this ideal, right? But when you really look up close, he's just like, it's nothing. It's all superficial. It's like smoke and mirrors. He'll run at the first sign of anything that tests him, right? Yeah. So there's more to build your life on than this sort of esoteric stuff. It's not that it doesn't have value, but there's more to it.
Yeah. But also, I just felt like the only one really like banking on it was Richard, because the others could like do with it or without it. Like they had other options if this thing didn't really work out. But yes. I felt there was more of a desperation with Richard. And so he was really, really needing this to work.
I mean, it's definitely a comment on like elitism.
Yeah.
There's definitely different strokes for different folks. Like Foster Dade explores the universe, is another book that I think does a really good job of exploring this idea of of privilege and how much you can get away with, uh, because you are rich and well connected, and you like basically you can't fail. Um,
Right.
but there are scapegoats, and there are people who have no choice but to fail. Like they have no other option but to
Mm-hmm.
fail. Like they don't have the things, the safeguards that
Yeah,
the others have.
exactly.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But I I enjoyed it. I do have a note in here that like just kind of remembering that the 90s were kind of a generally homophobic time.
Yeah.
And I feel like Donna Tartt is very raw. I think you can read this a couple ways because there's a couple moments where she quite boldly makes her characters say some pretty homophobic things.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you can look at it two ways. You can look at it like kind of as what it is at face value, that maybe like they're just homophobic and perhaps she's okay with that in some way. Uh, or you can take it in the context of the time that we were in.
Right.
Um, and at the time, certain words and statements were just said,
Yeah.
sometimes with full meaning, and sometimes
Just
without
flippantly.
without an understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think reading some of these passages today can be jarring
Sure.
because
Sure.
we just don't speak like that.
Sure.
Um, but I did remember like kind of remembering and like, oh yeah, we really did kind of talk like that.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Our mouths were just completely off the wall back
yeah,
then.
because I know she's gotten some. She's always, everybody gets criticism for something. Um, but she's definitely gotten some criticism in this for some of that. I think
Oh, I
the
didn't know.
Goldfinch has gotten a lot of criticism as well for some passages. Um, and I don't know, and I kind of think that's an interesting thing for everybody to give their 2 cents on.
Mm-hmm.
Is if you've read a bunch of Donna Tartt, what are your thoughts on the criticisms that are about her use of language, and possibly like whether or not she has got like racism or the like in her stories, if they're there for a purpose, or if they're not, like is it does it should it be there in the
Right.
story?
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, she's just like littering this like all throughout
Yeah,
the book. Like, it wasn't like that. And so while it may be a little jarring, my first thought was not like, oh, she's such a whatever. I just thought that, okay, well, I fully expect them to talk in this manner as
it
to when this
felt
story was set and this particular, group of kids.
it
So
felt
it just felt of the
authentic.
time.
It
Hmm.
felt authentic to the characters.
Yeah.
um and I guess I wonder, like, for books that are written like contemporary to us,
Hmm.
how do we, as we move away from them in time, um how do we, like, we're still living in the same time as them, right? Like, I don't know how to say this. It's not like we're reading Mark Twain, right?
Right. Right.
These are all sort of contemporary to us.
Yeah.
How does that differ in how we see things and what we are okay with and maybe are not okay with? I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just very tired, and I'm just having like this. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. That like I just find it interesting. I feel like we are easier to. It's easier to excuse, maybe not excuse, or like brush off
Things
things in the
like a
distant
long, long, long
past.
time ago. Right.
But when they're happening in the times that you've lived in,
Hmm.
is it does it make it more difficult? Do we hold it to a different standard? Do we judge it more harshly? Is it harder for us to see it in terms of the context of the moment? Because like
I
the
think for a
90s
lot of
weren't
people it is.
that long ago. Like I know the
Yeah.
90s were a long time ago, but they really weren't.
But not
Uh,
really.
but they were very different times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were. And I do think, if we're reading something that was a while ago, but like you lived in that while ago, it feels very fresh for you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're reading something that was written when you weren't even thought of as a human, I think
Yeah.
then your level of understanding is a little deeper. It's like, okay, well, that was a long time ago, and you have a better grasp on realizing and acknowledging that back then that is how they talk. But I think it's a little bit more difficult for people when it's like, well, heck, I was alive at that time and everything just feels kind of wrong. But I think it's also too important to remember that language is always evolving. And so even
Mm-hmm.
what the things that we say today, a decade from now is probably going to be very different.
Yeah.
Language is always evolving. So, but I know that when you're reading something like in the moment, you're not thinking that. You're not thinking
Yeah.
that right off the cuff.
Yeah. And also, like, remembering that a character saying it is not the same as an author saying it.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know. That was just like a random note I found, and sorry, it kind of sent me down a little rabbit hole,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, but the other thing I think is very well covered in here is how, and it's covered a lot in Foster Date as well. And I'm just going to keep mentioning that because I think if you like The Secret History, you'll like Foster Date Explores the Universe.
Dade as in Dade.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's this idea of always being, even if you go to all the same schools and even if work really hard to like keep up with the Joneses in some way,
Mm-hmm.
um, you're in all the same classes, you're doing all these things. There's always this divide, always, because you either grew up within almost the system of privilege, right? So you grew up going and seeing the same people in the same social spheres and the same experiences. You have the money to run with that crowd. You
Yeah.
have all of that. Um, and when you come from the outside without any of that, you will never be, no matter what you do,
Yes.
fully on equal footing. And you see that even in these young kids
Yeah.
who have really no reason truly to be that separate from each other. They're all just basically stuck in the woods going to school.
Right.
And there's still like ways of maintaining that hierarchy. And even when including Richard into the group, he's still like a little bit at arm's length
Out.
and he's still a
Yeah.
little bit an outsider
Yeah.
because he's never going to like have the ancestral home or like be able to just call the airlines and be like, I need a ticket to Argentina. Like he's
Right.
just not
Exactly.
going to do that. Like, I mean, he spends a winter like almost dying in the
Almost
freezing
freezing to
cold
death. Yeah. Yeah.
while his friends are doing whatever, right? And nobody
And this,
even
yeah,
thinks about him.
exactly. Exactly.
So,
And this goes both ways, right? Because I think also too, the person that's the outsider also knows they're an outsider. And so they also put a
mhm.
little bit of distance between
Yeah,
themselves. Um and I think that's probably like a little bit of like, protection, like a
yeah.
like a defense mechanism. You
Mhm.
you fully understand you don't have the means to do what they do and they go where they go. And so there's a little distance there that you place there yourself. But you're
Yeah.
absolutely correct.
Yeah. I mean, I think the scenes with him that winter,
That was rough.
everybody, that was really
I
rough
said, "This poor
with Richard.
kid, man."
That
Yeah.
kid. And the fact that he has like nobody at home. Like his
Yeah.
family is really awful. And
They're terrible.
he didn't just need to have this terrible family, like just it was awful. And
Terrible.
I think like a lot of the families in this group were not like the best. There was
Right.
a lot of distant parenting. And the ones that really didn't was like Bunny. Bunny had really great family.
Yeah. That was the really sad part
Yeah.
when you found that out. That was the
I mean,
sad
they were
part.
weird and they would definitely be Trumpers, but like
But lover, they were loving to their
they were very
family.
loving of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oof.
And going
Well,
back to the privilege part that you were talking about, and this
mhm.
was like so evident after they did the thing that they did, and like they're just so concerned with what's going to happen to them, and oh my god, I can't go to jail, and it's like a person is no longer here. And all you're thinking about, like the privilege is like jumping off the page. Like, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
So evident. So evident.
Yeah.
But also, I think a lot of that too is probably also just it's the privilege and like just being young and selfish. Being young and selfish,
Mm-hmm.
and just totally obsessed with your own self and what you have going on, not caring about anyone else but yourself.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody pushes any of these kids to care about anybody but themselves either. I
No,
mean, Julian could be that person, and Julian doesn't think about anybody but
I was
Julian.
going to say he's
So,
self-absorbed.
so you know who he reminds me of was oh god, what was his name in Harry Potter? Kenneth Branagh played him. That's the person he reminds me of. When I read Julian, I see like Kenneth Branagh in that like movie. Like I can't remember what the professor's name is, but that is like this person that I have. He's like very well coiffed, and he's just like
Mm-hmm.
always kind of maybe checking himself out in a mirror, or
Yeah.
like looking to see if he's mentioned somewhere in like a
Right.
gossip column.
Yes.
Like he
Oh my
is
goodness.
very self-absorbed.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, it's great that he has this, love of the classics or whatever, and of Greek and all of that. Um, but the obsession that he like
Yeah.
creates for these kids with no anything, like there's no support, there's no
Right.
guidance, there's no
Yeah.
care, that he just kind of lives in his own little bubble and enjoys I guess, the sycophantic nature of the kids, and
Yeah. It
he
really screws them in the end because, without him, there's nothing. There's nothing.
yeah.
It was just a waste.
Mhm.
What the hell did Julian have going on? I just
He strikes me as, like, the kind of person that just really needs people to love him, and, like, this was a great gig because he could create
for
like,
sure.
a little collection, a little bubble of simps who
Yeah.
just did what he wanted,
Yeah.
and, scratched all of his intellectual itches and made him feel so superior. But unfortunately, he gets this group of people that
Yeah.
are just a little too into what he's teaching
Yeah.
to the point where they get themselves into trouble.
Big
But it's the
time.
kind of thing kids do, though. It's like the beefed up going and taking your Ouija board and sitting in an attic somewhere, you know?
Mhm.
It's like
Mhm.
you want to play mess with things. Like you learn something and you want to like just that temptation that like, is it real? Can it happen? Can we do it?
Right.
Can we tap into this lost or unknown or unseeable thing? And like
Yep,
um
exactly.
it's like doing light as a feather, stiff as a board at some
Right,
point, you're
yes.
like
Yes.
like you're gonna do this
Yes.
thing, but it's on a much grander scale of
For sure.
consequences.
For sure.
So,
Yeah.
ah, yeah. So I definitely liked it better than I did.
The first time? Mhm.
Yeah. But I still don't think that I would call this like my favorite book. And I don't know if I would really be like, I recommend this to people. I do think that not that I don't recommend it to people, but I'm not like, oh, let
Yeah.
me like I'm not I just I don't know that I could ever have read this and been like, "This is amazing," unless I
Right.
was reading it closer to when it came out.
Mm.
But I
Mm.
would have been, like, basically a fetus. So, it
Yeah.
but, like, if I was, like, a 20-year-old when this came out, I think
Right.
I would have absolutely adored this, right? Because it would have reminded me. And it does remind me of so many people that I know in my life. I mean, I went to private schools. I went
Right.
to like I know some of these kids, some of the things that they do in this school are just normal things that kids do in these kinds of groupings. And
Right.
it's interesting to see how some things just never really change. Um, but I feel like I enjoyed Foster Dade, which is a similar kind of hits a lot of the similar notes. Obviously, it's not the same plot in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
but like it hits a lot of the same notes throughout. So, but it's more contemporary to my life, and maybe that makes me like it more.
Maybe. So when The Secret History came out, that was what, 1992.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was in like 11th or 12th grade. I don't know, maybe too young to even. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I was 10, so that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't know. Maybe if I just read it when I was in college instead of like a couple
Yeah.
years ago.
Right.
It's a shame because I think that like the ending of this is very good. Like the way that she gets to
Mm-hmm.
the end. And what I've noticed in this, I noticed it in A Little Friend, I noticed it in The Goldfinch, is she writes these really big, sort of dense books, but something happens in like the latter bit of it, and that
Yeah.
pacing just picks up and picks up and picks up and picks up, and you are just spiraling into whatever ending she's going to take you to. And I
Yeah.
really enjoy that. I enjoy the way she paces a novel.
Mm-hmm.
um it is sort of sumptuously slow until it's not, and then
Right.
you are just carried along until you get to the end of the book.
Right. Yeah. That was a nice experience with The Goldfinch too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I thought it was good, but it's not my favorite. And I honestly don't even think that this will like remain on my mind to even think about if I just it was a fine book.
Yeah, it's fine. I think there's
It was a
things I
fine
think
book.
about, but it didn't change my life. I'm
Yeah,
not like obsessed with it like a lot of
right.
people are, and that's fine. Like I love when people are obsessed with books, but
Absolutely.
it's not going to
I
be that one for me.
I think it'll be interesting too as we read more books that we have on our list that are in the dark academia lane,
Hmm.
to just kind of compare and contrast between them all as we're reading them. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. I mean, I think that it'll especially be interesting when we get to like a separate piece because that's
yeah,
really early. That's much older than
yeah.
The
Let me
Secret
see
History,
when
which
that
it's not
came
that
out.
The Secret History is like the dark academia book. It didn't start this like
Right.
genre, but it feels
Although
like the
articles say
book.
she did a lot of them.
But I think that it's the thing that people mark as like a big beginning. Like,
Yeah.
like we see all the time with things like Twilight and vampire books, and you're like,
Right.
hello, Anne Rice. but
Right.
but I do find it interesting that so many people, just like people across all kinds of different readers, really love this book,
Yes.
especially given how like this whole like ancient Greek ness of it all. Like I don't think that everybody has this love of that kind of classical study, literature, all of that. There's something else that Tart is bringing to the table
Mm-hmm.
that keeps all different kinds of readers engaged in this. And I think that's the beauty of this plot. Because like
Yeah.
we open up with the we know that there's a death. We know something happened to Bunny. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know how we got there.
Right.
And we know that there's an issue with this group of friends because
Right.
they're not the way that they're not the way they were at school when we open up
Right.
the thing. So you know you're in for quite a tale. And then she really does shake stuff up. She adds more. She spices it up. She throws you
She
a
does.
curveball.
She
And
does. She
it's
throws you a
interesting.
couple of curveballs. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it is so stressful, like with the letter, with Bunny's letter.
Yeah. It's like,
The
what?
stress as you're reading it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very curious to see what you say about A Little Friend.
Me too. Me too.
Hmm.
It's nice and chunky.
It's very
I'm
chunky, and
excited.
I really enjoyed the voice of it. I think because most of it is told through a very young narrator, and it's a very interesting voice. It's a very young narrator that is transferring. Um, she is transitioning from that like sort of rosiness of childhood
Mm-hmm.
to finally seeing like kind of like the cracks of reality as she grows up and
Ah.
seeing. And so it's a very interesting perspective, and then there's a couple other perspectives as well that are really interesting. But I think it's very beautifully done. I think that if you like, I'm gonna stick with my assessment. I'm just gonna keep saying it like a broken record. I think that if you like Dickens, you'll like this
Mm-hmm.
um, quite a bit, or like at least a Dickensian kind of structured plot with like all these characters and all these things going on. Lots of details that you're not sure if you need all these details. Maybe
Yeah.
you don't need them all, but they create like a much richer environment.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
it's much
excited
more
to get
interesting.
to it.
Yeah.
And hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get some news that she's gonna be throwing a new novel our way.
Bitch better.
I really enjoy her writing, so
Me too. I think
yeah.
she's very interesting, and I don't think any of them are really the same. From my recollections of the Goldfinch and reading
Mm-hmm.
these two so far this
That's what I
year,
love.
I they're not the same, but they're very much her. And
Yes.
I like that she has a very distinct voice,
Mm-hmm.
um, but isn't like just like the same thing all over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know. Sometimes it does seem like people want their favorite authors to give them the same thing, like just all the time, all the time. It's like you don't like when your author mixes it up, you know?
Yeah,
Let
well,
them
there's
spread their
genres for that.
wings.
There's genres for that. There's things where people can be repetitive, and it's okay to read those.
Yeah.
But some of us like a little bit more spice, and I don't mean of the sexy spice. I mean
Right. Right.
so. But anyway, is it time for book recommendations?
It is. What do you have for us today?
Oh, I don't even know. So uh I let's pick something. We'll pick this. In the Garden of Spite, I listened to this. I have two audiobooks to choose from for this.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is by Camilla Bruce. I'll try to show you the cover there.
Oh, okay.
So this is a nonfiction about this woman, Belle, who comes over from Norway in like the late 1800s to Illinois, and she ends up being probably one of the first female serial killers. And it's
Oh.
a historical fiction about her life, and it was just a good time. I listened to it on the way to and from Boston,
Uh-huh.
and I just enjoyed it. Like she like murders husbands, she may or may not murder some of her foster kids. She stabs someone with a
Oh.
pair of scissors. Like she's a good time, man.
Yahtzee.
She it is just fun, and it's somebody like I've never knew anything about, and the author does a really good job of in the story she embellishes stuff and brings in some things to make it like a really engaging narrative, and then the author's note clarifies a lot of the things that she added for like creative license and stuff. But it makes you want to go find out more about this person that existed and did all these things. And she's got quite a mug on her, let me tell you. She looks like a
Wow.
tough lady. So it's funny that she's out there just murdering people and burying them on her farm. And she may or may
Wow.
not have. She may have died in a fire, or she faked her own death. So that's like a big, conspiracy of whether or not she actually died. Um,
Oh. Oh,
yeah. So it's a
that's
good
wild.
time. It's a wild
That's
time. So if you like
wild.
serial killers, if you like a little history, a little mystery, a little all that, it's a good time. I enjoyed it. In the Garden of Spite.
Wow. Okay, and the Garden of Spite. Okay. May have to check that one out.
You do.
Okay.
It's just a good time.
Um, I am recommending a book that I pre-ordered that came out I think last month or maybe the month before, called Gifted by Suzumi Suzuki. This is translated
Mhm.
from the Japanese by Allison Markin Powell. Very short book, only 96 pages, but really, really good. So our unnamed narrator is a young woman, and she is working as a bar hostess in Tokyo. Yes, in Tokyo, in their district. And so this is what she does at night. Her mother is extremely ill. She is dying. And she has asked the daughter if she can come live with her to live out the rest of her days. So the daughter becomes a caretaker of her mother during the day. And we just have in this story just a very like intimate look at this young woman who by day is, you know, working as this bar hostess, doing all these negotiations with all these clients, you know, in her job, you know, with all of these events, and then, you know, caring for her mother. And there is this thing that happened between she and her mother, something that her mother did to her when she was very young, that is like kind of rearing this ugly head as she's caring for her mother. So you have her trying to do the best that she can to care for her mother, but this ugly ghost of this very traumatic experience that happened is like front and center. And so she's just trying to reconcile and deal with that because number one, it was never acknowledged. Um, she did not get an apology for it. It's just all these open-ended questions about why did you do that to me? Why did that happen? Why haven't you said anything about it to acknowledge what you did? And what happened to her left scars on her that she has covered with tattoos. So it's the constant reminder of something happening. But with her caring for her mother, it's just like it won't leave her. And so it's, you see her just trying so hard to do her best to care for her mother, but to also like get some answers from her mother as to why she did what she did. It's a very intimate story. And I thought it was really, really well done. Very short. You can read it in a couple of hours. And that's Gifted by Suzumi Suzuki, translated from the Japanese by Allison Markin Powell. It's very good.
Wonderful. Sounds really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love when a super, super short book gives you a big punch. I like that.
Yeah. It is always like a good feeling when they really, there's a lot of like meat to them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Anyway.
all right. Well, yeah. Let us know if
That's
you've read
it.
Donna Tartt. Let us know if you've read Donna
Yes.
Tartt. Give us all your thoughts about it. What books did you read by her? Did you like them, love them, hate them? Tell us everything.
Tell us everything.
Tell us everything.
If you leave a nice comment, we might read it and shout you out. So remember that.
We appreciate that.
We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us because we're on a time crunch here. Thanks for tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
Share this podcast with a friend or two or 10 and leave a review. That would help us out tremendously. So thank you in advance. And that's going to do it for us. We are out of here. Bye.
Bye.